Greetings, friends, and I must say, you're in for one heck of a treat today. You're about to meet one of the most respected authorities on our industry, and boy, she is fire. You're going to meet Kendall Bonner right here, coming up in just a minute on Cliff's Notes. Real estate agents, are you struggling with the day-to-day grind, dialing for dollars, putting in hours of floor time with little to show for it? Are you looking for tips, tricks, and tactics to accelerate your career as an agent that will have you closing more homes, working with more clients, and earning more money than ever before? Hi, my name's Cliff Freeman, and I've spent the past 2 decades of my real estate career running one of the top brokerages in DFW and personally coaching over 1,000 high-performing real estate professionals across North America. I created this podcast to share the strategies and tactics you need to explode your real estate business. I guarantee it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and we are super excited to be here today. I'm here with C3 in the co-pilot seat, and flying in the engineering section of this plane is Trelvis. Trelvis, man, I got to tell you what. Can we just pray real quick?
Absolutely.
Is that all right? Sweet baby Jesus, would you please just bless the Texas Rangers so that we get a sweep of the Arizona Diamondbacks? It's in your name we pray. Amen. Sorry.
Amen.
I just had to put that in the universe, okay?
Man, how about that
Because
series?
I'm telling you what, it's been, 2011 since we were in this game last time?
2010, I think.
10, was it?
Yeah.
And Trelvis, you think we got the broom ready?
So I don't want to speak on a sweep too early, but I think they will hold their trophy up at the end of it. I will say that much.
I hope so. And speaking of trophies, man, we have got a trophy that's about to join us here. You haven't had the pleasure really to spend much time with Kendall,
No,
but I
no.
got to spend time on a big boat with her in Washington State and up in Canada, and really get to know this young lady and her husband. They're both attorneys, so you know they're smart. And I mean, she is like one of the most respected speakers at RIS, Inman, all of the big events.
Follow-Up Boss.
Follow-Up Boss. I mean, it just EXPCon. I mean,
Right.
everywhere. So
Yeah.
let's bring her on without further ado. This is Kendall Bonner. Kendall, all the way from Tampa Bay. How are you, my dear?
Hello, I am so honored to be here today. This is, such a privilege, and thank you for having me. Can't
Well,
wait.
we are super excited. I mean, to have somebody like you here today is it's really a blessing for us. And this audience, I mean, this will be one of those State
of
Fair
Fame.
Blue Ribbon ESPN Hall of Fame episodes today, because you've got such a perspective on our business. I mean, not just from the brokerage side, and you have a team there in Tampa. You're like, what, number one in Tampa, I think, or, you know, you're just a rock star. So, and we'll learn more about your team in a minute. And then your husband, Bill, I mean, you guys met in law school, right? If I recall, isn't that correct?
We did. My husband and I met in, I think that would have been 2002, and we had a class together, negotiations. He sat right behind me, and he would come to coffee. It was an evening class that summer, and he would come to class every evening with his cup of coffee. And I just thought he was cute, so I actually asked him out on our first date.
Woo! I like this woman. Yes,
I do too.
I like the way she rolls
Confident.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So it's funny though that now you guys are married. How's that negotiations class working out for you?
I still win.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, look, let's do this for the benefit of our those in our audience who haven't had the delight and the pleasure to meet you. Let's just rewind a little bit here, and people see you and they go, "Golly, look at her. She's at the pinnacle of the industry right now." And she must have just done this super easy, and growing up, it must have been everything just was all perfect and everything. Can we just walk back a little bit and just talk about your journey a little bit? Let's go back as far as you can, and tell us, what was it like growing up as Kendall?
Oh gosh, yeah, thank you for that question. So for me, it was interesting because my mom was a single parent with 3 children. She was a doctor. She had me, while she was in medical school. So her and my father met, they got married, had me, but she was still in school at the time. And I am so grateful because so I was at her medical school graduation, which was, 2-year-old me getting to be there at USC Medical School, watching my mother get her medical license is pretty amazing to be able to say that. They divorced when I was 4.5, and I was a daddy's girl. So that was really traumatizing for me because my middle brother, had been born just weeks before they separated, and so it was an interesting journey with my mom because she was tough. She was a tough teacher, tough cookie, an overachiever, definitely a perfectionist, and she didn't hold back when it came to expecting the same from her children.
I mean, I remember you the first time you told me that story. I mean, your mom had some internal strength and force and whatever to be able to persevere. And I mean, she excelled in medical school, I remember you saying, and at the same time, she had the three of you on her back and did what she had to do to provide. What did you learn? What's the most important thing that you think you learned from your mom, Kendall?
Gosh, a great question. So I feel like I learned so many things. And, for people that don't know, my mom has since passed away. She passed away of dementia at the age of 60. So really young. And I took care of her those last few years of her life. I was her legal guardian, caregiver, the trustee of her trust. And so I think I did that probably about 7 or 8 years, maybe 9. And I learned so much. So some things that I learned from my mom were really the power of prayer and the impact of prayer on my life and on my children's lives and on the lives of the people I care about. That was really a huge lesson from my mother. Another lesson I got from my mother was why wait? My mom was basically 50 years old, arguably in the prime of her life when she got struck with an illness that none of us understood. Took us all a long time to recognize what was happening to her, and basically took her out, like just deteriorated her life experience, right, for the last decade of her life. And so it made me think, there were so many things I wanted to do, but they were things I would tell myself, oh, when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm retired, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And what my mom taught me was why wait? No one's promised tomorrow. Um, you know, Things can be going really well in your life and things can happen. And so it's so important to live and to cherish the things that are truly important in life and be focused on those things as opposed to all the things that you think you want or need. It's also about just being very, very, very grateful for what you actually have and being present in the moment. And so that has been a truly life changing mindset for me, is that intense level of gratitude, this intense level of just, appreciation and humility for everything that's happened. So it keeps me balanced because on the one hand, it's like, hey, when bad things happen, I can think they can always be worse, right? But then when things are going well, you think, well, hey, I can always do better. So it keeps you humble and grateful all at the same time. And I would say I learned those things from my mother.
That's just an amazing tribute to your mom, and I know she's listening and super proud of you. Um, so as far as directions, as you started to think about a career, you're probably smart enough to have gotten into any medical school you wanted to, but you took the LSAT and wound up in law school. What were the circumstances, and what really compelled you to choose law school over something else?
So this is actually interesting story. I mean, in some ways. So basically, my mom raised me JD, MD, PhD, pick one. So going to college was like going to high school. In fact, it was in her trust that if we did not graduate college, we couldn't inherit. Okay. So that was my mom was a self-made millionaire, right? She grew up in poverty and had owned her own businesses in California and built up some wealth, right? So it was JD, MD, PhD. So obviously my mom was an MD, and I said, nah, I don't want to do that. They work too hard. But look at me now. And then what happened was when I was in high school, I went to college during the summer between my junior and senior year, and I ended up going to college there where I went to that summer school, which was UC Santa Barbara, which was also my mom's alma mater. And then in college, I went to graduate school. So I was a McNair Scholar. And so I spent the summer at Claremont Grad University and took some courses there. And it was in that time that I realized that while I wanted to get a PhD and in my mind at that time be a professor, because I told my mom when I was young I want to be a teacher, and she said they don't make any money, so you need to do something else. So I was like, okay, well I'll show you. I'll be a professor and do something great that way. And so what happened though is in that experience I realized that it was too loose. I needed structure. I needed semesters. I felt I was too immature actually to go to PhD program. So I said, I'll go to law school where I have structure, where I have systems. I have a semester long class. I get a grade. I get to move on to the next thing. And then after that, because I enjoyed school, I would go and pursue my PhD. And so that's actually how I got to law school. I ended up getting a scholarship, but I knew I never wanted to be a lawyer. So I never even registered for the California bar exam. What everyone else did, I did not. And so when I met my husband, it was, well, before that, what my joke through law school, because I didn't register for the bar was, and this was purely a joke, I was there to get my MRS degree. And I was just kidding, but literally be careful what you put out into the universe because it can happen. My husband and I got married on Saturday, graduated law school on Sunday, and then by Tuesday we were driving to Florida. So I ended up getting my MRS degree and my JD that in the same weekend.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh,
How
isn't
cool
that
is that?
cool?
Yeah.
Oh man, that is
So
such a
that's how I ended up
story.
in law school. Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. So you decided just, I mean, this was more like just a rock climb for you. I'm going to go get my JD, but I'm not going to practice as a lawyer. You know, I did that with my engineering degree. When I graduated, I never looked back. And yeah, so anyway, but so tell us what you guys got at. You moved to Florida and you just showed up like, you know, here come the Beverly Hillbillies. We just show up in Tampa and you had no plans and, or did you know at that time what you were going to do? Did you get into real estate at that time?
So actually, no. So obviously my husband, he has this opinion about having a law degree. It's like, Kendall, it's a license to print money. But we're students, because I was 24 when I graduated, right? At law school. So I was a baby.
Wow.
And so it was, let's go take the bar exam and, and let's practice law and, pay the student debt and just start our careers. So between my husband and my mother, I ended up actually practicing law. I did take the Florida bar exam and passed. That was a pretty traumatic experience because I had moved to Florida very young, newlywed, no friends. And to be perfectly honest, it was my first experience with a Confederate flag. Like, coming from LA, like that's just not something you see. Moving to the South, that's definitely something more common. And so I cried my whole first summer when I moved to Florida. But I put on my clothes and went to work and just got started. I started as a public defender and I did that for a couple of years, picked juries, did depositions, did trial work, went to the jails, got to do all of that. Had some really fun and interesting trials I tried and won. I was actually pretty good. I did Baker Acts and, worked with people in the hospitals. And then I got recruited into another law firm that did workers' comp insurance defense. And I did that for a little while, traveled all over the state of Florida. Again, did, the depositions and the other types of activities that go along with that. There's no trials in workers' comp. But so I had a corporate client, did that for a while, which was very interesting. And I learned a ton. And then in the meantime, my husband had started his own law firm. And so I eventually had baby number two, and then joined him with his law firm. And we did bankruptcy. And it was there I did some DUI work. We also did some wills and trusts, and we did that for quite some time before I actually got into real estate. So I actually did spend several years practicing law and learned a ton.
So tell us about that sort of zero moment of truth when you looked at Bill and said, you know what? Law is just not for me. I want to go be a realtor of all things. Dear God. When was that moment?
So my mom, well, let me start here. I um, did the application for my real estate license in 2009, and I thought I would do it just for fun. And then that was also the same year my mom came to live with me because she was sick. So for 2 years, I did not uh, do anything related to real estate at all. I just continued practicing law and tried to focus on taking care of my mother. And what happened was, because by the way, I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, plus my own business, our own company, plus my mother who had to live with us and needed care. And so 2 years passes by, and you realize the application is going to expire, or I did. And I said, Kendall, now's the time to either get this license or move on and stick to what you know and what you're doing. And again, that lesson from my mother: why wait? Why do something in life that you're not passionate about, that you don't love? Explore what other opportunities are out there. So, but I think I got into real estate naively, like most people do, right? C3, you had the benefit of watching your father do this, and so hopefully you kind of knew what you were getting into, and you knew the success that you could have, right? But you also knew how much hard work it would be too, right? The sacrifices that had to be made, and the choices, and all of that. But I ultimately ended up taking the test, because the rules in Florida are different for lawyers than it is for a traditional person getting a real estate license. And I remember I passed the test in the first try. I had held on to a recruiting letter that the brokerage down the street from my law firm had had for 2 years. I took it in, I went in, and I said, I want to work at your company and I'm going to be a listing agent. And they said, yeah, 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 sure. Okay, sign here. And I was like, no problem. And within the first 30 days, I went to every class they offered, which was not many compared to with the kind of education we see today. But I went to every single thing, whether I was the only student in the room or there were 4 other students in the room, didn't matter to me. I was going to everything. And at the end of that educational cycle, I came back to my husband and I said, yeah, babe, I'm not taking on any more. We were doing bankruptcy law at that time, bankruptcy clients. I'm going to service what I had because I was handling all the chapter 7. So those are usually like a 90-day cycle. And I had 2 listings within a week of that. And then I had a closing 90 days later and never looked back, like fell in love.
Yeah. And so Bill's looking at your bank account and all of a sudden he sees blip, blip. And he's going, well, maybe this isn't a bad idea, huh? What do you think? Yeah. So was he fully supportive of you going down this trail?
So actually, it's not that he wasn't supportive, but I used to say it took him about 8 years to forgive me because I think he felt a little abandoned, because we have been doing this work together. And then I just basically said, peace out, and went and did something else. And so I think it was traumatizing for him a little bit in the beginning, but I think he ultimately looks back on the situation with some gratitude because it was a good thing for our family, right? It did diversify our family some. And then eventually we ended up selling his law firm in 2014, and I opened a brokerage. So, and then he came and joined me there. I think my husband likes us working together or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember talking with you a bit about how both you and I took care of our moms. Mine had dementia, and she was in her late 80s, actually, well, mid 80s when she moved in. We moved in with her and started taking care of her. How long was it during this? Had you started real estate when before your mom passed, or what was the order of events there?
Yeah, so she moved in the first time with us in 2009. I found a wonderful caregiver at that time about a year later because she needed like real care. And so then so in 2011, I got my real estate license. 2014, I opened my first brokerage and franchise. And then my mom passed away actually in 2015. So I had a very baby company when my mom actually passed away. And so I had to come home. So meaning I had to work from home so my mom had an accident in that June before she passed, and that put her in the hospital. And it was in the hospital, and I thank God for this because it was something like they saw a blockage in her stomach or something. And so they held her overnight and they had to do all these tests and things. And so, of course, that brought me to the hospital every day to take care of her and be there. And it was in that hospital stay that I learned how to take care of her, like learned how to change her diaper, like, or her pad or her dressings, learned how to like do all the things, how to feed her, how to, you know, um, do whatever it is she needed. And they go to take the follow-up exam 3 or 4 days later, and whatever they saw the first time was gone.
Wow.
So it was so weird because they thought there was something else wrong with her, and there turned out to not be anything else. But I thank God because it was during that time that I got to learn how to take care of her.
Yeah.
But we also realized that she probably needed hospice at that time.
Yeah. How old were your
And
children?
so I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. How old were your children at that time?
8 and 10.
Wow. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were young. And so she came back home with me and brought in-house caregivers. And I was able to be with her when she passed away because that was one of my prayers, was that my mom would not pass when that time came alone, and that I would be able to be there for her and with her and take care of her. I'd always promised her when I was a little girl, Mommy, if anything happens to you, I'll take care of you. And I thank God every day that I got to do that. I always felt like I never did enough or I didn't do well enough, but um, I've since reconciled that with my mom. I did the best that I could, and I know my mom is grateful, or would have been grateful if she was aware of what was happening. And so I had to learn to forgive myself, right? For again, that perfectionist mindset that, oh, I could do this better. But I mean, having little ones and having a sick mother and having a business and a husband and other people, and I was managing my mom's trust. So like I had my grandmother I was taking care of, and my younger brothers. My youngest brother was still really young, and I had to kind of help facilitate him in his life and take care of him. And so I had a lot on my plate, and I had to learn to be have grace for myself,
Yeah.
during that time.
That learning how to forgive yourself and, realizing you strive for perfection through school and everything, and you realize that, by golly, I'm just not going to be perfect every time, but I can forgive myself. How has that helped you now that you get on stage in front of thousands of people and you deliver a knockout talk or something like that? How have those experiences that you've had in life, like with your mom, how has that helped you become better at communicating and doing what you do now?
Yeah. So for me, I think, and this is a story I tell people all the time. The breakdown in every relationship we have is due to unmet expectations. And, part of that is because, and I learned this from my mother, because when I was a little girl, my mom would say, clean your room. And I'm like, I'm looking around, my bed is made, there's nothing on the floor, the clothes are put away. Like, what do you mean, Mommy? Like, the room is clean. And in her mind, it was only clean if I had dusted, if I had, swept up the floor or vacuumed or whatever, right? Like, she had these expectations of me that, in my mind, she hadn't communicated, because she would say to me stuff like, well, don't you see it? And, I was like, no, I don't. Tell me, right? So what did that teach me? That taught me that a lot of times we have expectations that we fail to communicate, but we have, right? And that, or we think we don't have them and we do have them, right? And so those things have all taught me that when you have these opportunities in life, it's so important to communicate, right? And it's so important to be authentic. It's so important to be honest. And it's so important to be real with yourself, right? And so I'll never forget the very first time I was on stage was at a Remax event, and I was on a main stage getting interviewed by Wayne Brady, and there was thousands of people at this convention, and my leg was bouncing like this, and it was so bad. And I felt so scripted because I was afraid I would babble and go on and on and on. And so that was my first real experience on a big stage. But I learned so much from that because I had all these expectations of myself about being perfect and all of that. And I realized, like, Kendall, especially as I fast forward now, however many years later it's been, it's not about perfection. It's just about growth and honesty and transparency at the end of the day. And that's what people want. People don't need to see you be perfect. And in fact, they don't believe it, even if you tried to be perfect. So stop focusing on that and just focus on what's real, because that is what they ultimately expect and need from us when we, have these opportunities to share our stories or the lessons we've learned and things like that.
I'm just going to let that sit for just a second. That is so cool.
Thank you.
So we can shift gears a little bit now. And I know that you are really a subject matter expert on a lot of things in this business because you have obviously the attorney background. I'm sure that when you see Remax and Redfin going up against the Justice Department and all of these other people, I know that's just like somebody throwing you a fastball right over the plate. Can you just open your book of knowledge up for a little bit and just give us a little bit of insight in terms of how you see what's going on right now with these lawsuits? What do you think the impact is going to be on the average real estate agent in this country? There's almost 1.5 million of us. How are our lives going to be impacted by all this?
That's a great question. I feel like, of course, like every lawyer, it depends. Literally we say that. It's like, it's not written in the books, but literally we're trained to say that kind of stuff, right? So I haven't forgotten that. It depends. But I will say this about it. It's interesting because, a year ago, everyone thought this was just going to go away. Brokers were not paying attention. If a broker's not paying attention, an agent's not paying attention, right? A lot of the information we get as real estate agents is through the lens of our brokerages, our memberships, and things like that, right? So I felt like we weren't talking about it enough last year. And the reason why I think that was a mistake is just because you have two choices in life. You can be reactive or proactive. And if you wait till the last minute, you end up reactive. Whereas if you can anticipate and know something's coming, you can become proactive. And then now you're making, to me, more informed, educated decisions about what you're going to do, right? And the impact it will have, because you have time to think about that. Whereas if you wait till you have to react, you end up making fast decisions and they're not always as well thought out as you would have liked for them to be, right? So having had some time myself to be thinking about these things over the last year, for example, because right now, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the first trial, which is the one I believe that's out of Missouri, right? The other one I think is in Illinois. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's these two class action lawsuits happening right now. So one's actually in trial as the time we're recording. They're like halfway through of a 3-week trial, and then the second trial, which is the bigger, the $40 billion alleged damage trial, is set for sometime in early 2024, right? So to bring everyone up to speed, we've had 2 of the defendants settle, which is anywhere formerly known as Realty. They, oversee the Better Homes and Gardens brand, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, I believe Sotheby's, ERA. They settled for about 83 million, more or less, and some other terms. And then Remax settled for about 55 million and some terms as well. And part of those terms, I think the biggest one was that they were not going to require their brokers and franchisees to have to affiliate with NAR, and that it could be a choice. And so that happened just in weeks leading up to the trial start date, right? And so right now, the remaining defendants are Keller Williams, NAR, and Home Services of America. Most people know them as Berkshire Hathaway. And so, reading the transcripts of these trials has always been, sometimes I read it out loud to my husband, and really it's just like the reporting on it. And my husband and I kind of chuckle, like, did they just say that? And really the part of what's ridiculous about the whole thing is that you do have people making decisions about our industry that really don't understand it. Because for better or for worse, we have done a really great job and or a really terrible job of communicating what we actually do and what we experience, right? So because we've not explained to people really what we do as well as we probably should, people think that we get paid too much and don't do anything. And we all know that that's not accurate, right? But one of the merits of the case is, basically that the challenge is this payment of compensation to a buyer's agent without negotiation. And I told people, it's like, well, that's both true and false, right? So it's true in that a listing agent is negotiating the compensation for both sides, right? When they go into a listing appointment, there is that negotiation, right? And the seller is often signing off saying, I agree to pay the listing agent X and a co-broke if they're involved Y, whatever those numbers are. And so there's a negotiation there and an opportunity to negotiate. But what makes the challenge or the allegation interesting when you think about it though, is that for a buyer's agent, whether you are brand new, super experienced and sold 100 homes or been in the business 30 years, you get paid the same.
I have preached that forever. Yes.
Arguably that's a problem, right? So people with more experience should get paid arguably more. People with less experience paid less. Like in most industries, that's naturally how it works. But in ours, that is that one place where that's the biggest challenge, right? And that is a fact, right? That happens that way. So that's part of what they're challenging. And so they're trying to decouple the compensation, but there's a lot of challenges with that, right? I mean, to expect a buyer to pay for their own representation. Some can afford it, but many probably will not be able to afford it. And, it'll be the people that really need it that are the ones that won't be able to afford it. Like perhaps, like our VA borrowers. Currently, as it stands right now, they can't pay anything. They can't even pay our transaction fees. So how are they going to be able to have representation in their transaction without somebody else agreeing to pay for that representation?
That's right.
So that's one party that will be negatively affected by this. Another party are our first-time home buyers. If we decouple compensations, and the biggest thing is whether they decouple it or not, I hope that it's never made illegal or against the rules for a seller to pay a buyer's agent. It should be at worst case flexible, meaning a seller can choose to or choose not to, and a buyer can choose to pay their own or choose to request it from the seller, right? At least if we get to that place, that's where I hope it lands and not become this requirement that everyone pay for their own representation. Because another party that will be impacted is so VAs, first-time home buyers, which according to NAR represent about 26% of home buyers from last year. And then of course we have our lower income or our retirees, they also will need assistance, right? I mean, we could have retirees who want to sell their home, but are afraid to because they won't have the help to buy the next home, right? And get them in the communities that they need to get into. So those are some of the potential concerns and consequences of this. I do think that more than ever, buyers agents need to use buyer brokerage agreements. You never show, you don't list a house without a listing agreement. Why are we showing homes without buyer brokerage agreements?
Yep.
Right? Even just so it's clear, again, managing expectations about how the agent is getting paid, because we're not in a business where we're supposed to work for free, right? And none of us want to work for free. But at the same time, we need to be clear on, if I am going to do the work, this is what I will be paid, whatever that is. And so that needs to happen. And so buyers agents need to get better at articulating their value and, getting the customer and the client to truly see, like, hey, these are all the things I'm going to do. I'm going to help make this transaction smoother for you because I know this, because I know that, because I can direct you here, because I can help manage your expectations, because I can be the safe harbor in the storm. Because we all know how emotional the real estate transaction is, right? So there's so many places where we can bring value to the customer, and it's just, we've got to get really, really good and clear about how to articulate that. So instead of someone wants to see a house, no, we don't see houses till we've had a consultation. I need to understand what you're looking for. I need to understand what you need so I can tell you how I can help you and I can provide those solutions. And then not only that, I'm going to also ask for your loyalty in working with me, your commitment, right? And here's my buyer brokerage agreement. And so I think that's I think a positive outcome that can come from all of this. But as a consequence, I think we'll see a lot of agents, good majority of real estate professionals sell 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, or 3 homes a year. And I think that if we continue down this path, it'll be harder and harder for them to do those 1, 2, or 3 transactions, for it to be worth paying the dues, worth all of that effort, if they aren't really fully able to commit to the industry as a career. And hopefully, I think a consequence out of that is we'll start to see more full-time committed professionals to our industry. And that will be good for us as a whole. And I think it'll be good for consumers. And I think at the end of the day, will probably cause us to lose a few of that 1.5 million realtors.
It's thinning of the herds. I think it's necessary.
Yeah,
Right.
we could benefit from that, couldn't
Right,
we?
right,
Everybody
yeah.
could.
Yeah.
If you compare, a lot of people compare compensation in our business to the legal business, and I mean, dual agency is outlawed here in Texas. We can't do dual agency, and it's one of those things where it's hard to find the right place for this to land. For the simple reason that, like you said, even our government has made it difficult for buyer agents to be able to make a living because of the VA rules. Explicit in every appraisal I've seen, because the appraiser always wants to know, were there 2 agents involved? Was it for sale by owner? Were there no agents involved? So explicit in that valuation is the compensation, the average compensation of the real estate agents. So, I mean, it's not transparent, but it is, right? I mean, it's just kind of like, okay, well, are we really, who's being hurt here, I guess, and are they really, I mean, I know people are settling, they're just bending over because it's easier to just quit than it is to, pay for this thing to go and go and go. And if there is a trial and a verdict, you're going to have every lawyer in every corner of the country coming in trying to make a living off of this. And that potentially is what we're creating now, is where, I mean, and I'll ask, as a lawyer, do you see this, is this just the beginning of like thousands of lawsuits that are going to come around after this? Or, I mean, they're hitting the big firms, but are there other areas where that we're not even aware of yet, and unintended consequences of this that are just going to keep people tied up in court for a long time?
So that's a big question, but I'll do my best to answer it. So there are other smaller cases happening right now. The two that are happening right now, and the one that's in trial, these are class actions, right? So they ask multiple plaintiffs to join, which is why the damage, assessments or estimates are so high. So one of them is $4 billion, the other one's $40 billion over a fixed period of time across a fixed number of MLSs, ranging from specific brokerages, right? The two settlements are supposed to be nationwide settlements, so designed so that they can't be sued by future plaintiffs, right? So at least that's my understanding of how those were written. And then, as far as, will we see a bunch of pop-ups? Honestly, I don't know, because it depends on how this one ends. I mean, we'll have something in the next 2 weeks. We'll know, right, what the outcome is. And so, once we have those outcome, this first outcome, that will set up what happens going forward, right? I mean, and I think what's the first part of your question was, do they really understand what they're doing, or what is the real goal here? I mean, I think they say it's, by being violating antitrust, and it's anti-competitive. The challenge is that we have a system that has operated a particular way, and it's pretty consistently operated that way for a long time, right? And so they really kind of want to break that up. And so I think the goal here is to provide more options, right? And provide that change the consumer expectation, because everyone thinks it's all about the money. But when you have class actions, if you've ever seen those settlements, I mean, the plaintiffs don't get very much usually. By the time it's all said and done and broken up, they're not ever really getting back the money that they, were expecting.
Settlement, the law
Oh, I
firms
can't hear you,
killed it.
Cliff.
What's that? Can you
I'm
hear me?
sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I was saying that if you look at the tobacco settlement, the law firms killed it. I had some friends down in Houston, and they were done. I mean, they made so much money on that case, they didn't have to practice law again. They did, of course, and then the plaintiffs, again, like you said, it was just kind of the breadcrumbs that were left after all the expenses were paid. But do you see similarities here between the tobacco settlement and what's going on with these brokerages caving right now?
So, funny you should bring that up, because ironically, my husband, his very first law firm job, he worked for one of the lawyers that was a part of the tobacco lawsuits, right?
Okay.
Way back whenever. And so, anyhow, what was interesting about that particular outcome compared to this, part of the problem is that they're trying to change something that has the eye of the consumer, may not be necessarily in the consumer's best interest per se, but either way, typically, if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? So if the practical outcome of these trials is just, hey, we'll pay some money, hey, you don't have to affiliate with NAR, but you can if you want to, don't have to if you don't want to, maybe nothing changes, right? Because I mean, we already have it where there's several MLSs, and now with NAR's new definition saying that you no longer have to have $1 in the MLS, you can do $0, right? We already had a couple of MLSs doing that, and nothing changed. And to me, the reason why nothing changed is because consumer behavior hasn't changed. Well, how do you change consumer behavior? Well, you have to do what the tobacco lawsuit outcomes did, which was you have to re-educate the consumer. So what I find probably the biggest, I won't say threat, but threat to how we've always done things is not whether we win or lose these cases, but whether the outcome requires us to re-educate consumers. In other words, the tobacco companies had to spend I don't know, millions or billions of dollars, however much it was, re-educating the consumer that smoking was bad for you and that tobacco was bad for you, right? And that you could die. You know, general surgeon's warning or surgeon general's warning, right? Like, sorry, I don't smoke, so I don't ever get that stuff. But you know, there's all these like warnings everywhere and all this re-education, and you know, it's like you would see these really like scary, ugly, crazy commercials about people's lungs and like talking out of their neck. Like, I mean, it was like inducing fear, right? I mean, it was worked on me. I was afraid. So I never in my life have touched a cigarette because of, you know, the education I received about it. Imagine if we had to re-educate a consumer about the way real estate works and the way commissions work. And I mean, that could have a massive change if once we, you know, if you start to convince sellers, nope, you don't have to offer compensation.
Last
That
thought
could
on
have
this.
a huge
Yeah. Yeah, last thought on this, because we're about to run out of time, but should a seller's agent be allowed to compensate a buyer's agent? Because they're
should it,
saying
well, I mean,
no. They're saying no right now, right?
well, it's not, it's what they're actually saying is that they don't want the seller to have to pre-agree to pay a buyer's agent before they know what they're getting. So it's, you know, maybe perhaps sellers will start to pay a buyer's agent directly. That might be one of the easier ways to resolve the allegations that are being made against our industry, right? Because they're saying like we're some sort of like mafia or something. I don't know. I forgot the exact word, but it's silly. But
Cartel. Yeah.
yeah, cartel. Thank you. You know, and but at the same time, um, you know, I think that in some ways it might behoove a buyer to pay for their own representation where they can afford it, because in that way they can kind of have this like a more direct and committed relationship to their agent, right? So I mean, right now we have this problem where a buyer will work with three agents at the same time, and all three agents are going to lose in that scenario. Whereas now, if the buyer knows they're committing to pay, they're going to work to find the right agent for them and they're going to be committed to them. And that's security for the buyer's agent also.
Yeah. You know, maybe they'll
I mean,
come
there's
up,
all perspectives.
maybe they'll do what they did in the legal business and come up with public buyer agents like public defenders, where the government pays for your buyer agent, right? Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, my thought around that, I think about people rebating their commission and, you know,
Oh, true, yeah.
you know, how that would work alongside what's going on with this as well. You know,
I wonder how, if that was argued at all. I mean, their buyer agents will rebate everything but a few $100s.
I've been coming
Just-
across a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean,
lately.
here in Texas, it's
Yeah.
rampant. Wow, I am just, this could go, we could talk
could
about
still
this
could, yeah.
for a long time.
yeah.
And Kendall, you are such a gem. I mean, really, just a wealth of knowledge about all this, and your insight is so incredibly helpful. Man, just thank you so much for first of all, for opening up about, you know, the Kendall Bonner that none of us really knew, and then just adding your expertise and sprinkling the dust on this crazy situation we have now with these lawsuits. You have just been amazing. Do you have a final word you'd like to say to our audience before we take off here?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, thank you, Cliff and C3. You guys are amazing, and I value the relationship and the friendship for sure, and the opportunity to be here. But I like to leave with a quote, and actually, I'll give two quick quotes that are two of my top-down favorite quotes. And one of them is, "The quality of your life is a direct reflection of what you make non-negotiable." That's by Keith Cunningham from a book called The Road Less Stupid. And I think it's so important to make things in your life non-negotiable so that you can have the highest quality of life. And then the last quote is from Alvin Toffler. And he said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those that cannot read and write, but those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And if we were ever on a precipice of a time in our careers where we were going to have to learn, unlearn, and relearn, we are right there right now. So let's not be illiterate headed into this next century.
Wow, that's
Mic
profound.
drop, yes.
Yeah, mic drop indeed, for sure. Well, Kendall, give our friendships and love to Bill, your awesome husband, and it's so great to see you. I know we're going to cross paths again soon, but thank you again so much for being here today. It's great to reconnect.
How could anyone reach you, Kendall?
Yeah,
Or if somebody
real
wanted
quick,
to touch
is there
base with you.
any way to get a hold of you if somebody wanted to reach out?
Yeah, so obviously, so kendallbonner.com is actually a link tree, has a link out to a bunch of stuff and value and contact us and my social media profile. So if you go to Kendall Bonner, Kendall Bonner, BONNER.com, you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, keep your eye open. I know you're going to have some people reaching out. I tell you, man,
Thank
what
you.
a great episode.
Smart as a tack. I'll tell you,
Yeah,
or sharp as a tack. and-
wonderful. Well, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen, I tell you, I sure hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And, thank you for being here. If it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be much need for us either, would there?
No, sir.
Yeah, but we'll be back. We're going to be out next week. Got to take a quick trip down to Scottsdale to see some good friends of ours then. But we'll be back before you know it with another episode of Cliff's Notes. So tune in every Thursday where we'll give you the tips, tricks, and tactics to explode your business. I guarantee it.